back to MG Midget, birth of a race car. This is capturing the journey from car restoration of an MG Midget 1275 to competing in the MG Car Club Speed Series. In this episode we're going to start doing some preparation for paint. The car was stripped anyway, so that makes life a lot easier. And as I've been fitting the panels, first thing I did was go around the car and just put some filler in to fill in the holes. Here you can see the back. So what I've done is just tidied up the rear and along the rear quarter repair with a bit of filler. And already what I've done is go around the car with some 80 grit sandpaper on a random orbital sander, just to provide a really good key and get rid of the majority of the filler. So what I'm going to do now is take a look at where I've still got a few little holes, things that aren't quite perfect. We've not got a smooth flat edge here, so I'm just going to put a little bit of filler in here and have a session over the next hour, just filling in these little holes, so I can go over with the sander once more and just get a nice smooth surface across all of the panels. I haven't had to use much filler, but in this area where the top of the A-post is, where the new A-post met, it's a little bit there, and where we had our kind of a wing join here, I've had to put a bit in place here. This is probably the area where there's the most, because we're blending into the arch here as well. So there's a few little areas where I've got little divots, and it's those kind of things now that I'm just going to touch up with the filler before going over with the sander once more. So I've gone over the bodywork for a second time, a little bit more filler, smoothed that down with 80 grit paper, so I'm happy with that. So what I'm going to do is start smoothing out the grits now. I'm going to go up to 240, and then the goal is to get to 300, at which point I can begin putting some primer on. So I'm just going to use the random orbital sander to do that. Go by hand into some of these tighter areas here, and then in between each session use some panel wipe just to give the bodywork a wipe down. So next step is the 240 grit. It's worth pointing out at the beginning that I'm not a professional car sprayer. This is the first car I've really had a go at, and my learning has been mostly through internet research and YouTube videos, something you're more than capable of doing yourself. But this is just to show my experience of painting a classic for the first time. I'm using cellulose paint, and first in this episode we're going to have a look at primer. So what I've done is I've smoothed the car back using filler, starting with 180 grit, 240, moving up to around 300. Now I'm ready to apply a primer coat. I'm going to build that up. I'm aiming for 3 or 4 primer coats, and then I'm going to flat that back using around 600 grit paper, and that'll prepare it ready for top coat. So that's what I'm going to do in this episode. After some internet research, I've decided to go for a Sealy 701G gun with a 1.4 nozzle. I've put myself a water trap on the nozzle, and also set up the compressor with a regulator and water trap to run the spray gun at around 50 psi. So I think I've got a fairly good setup. In terms of thinners, I bought some cellulose thinners, so I'm going to mix that up with a 50-50 mix with good thinners, and then be ready to go. I've just got to wait until the temperature's about right. I'm going to look for somewhere between 15 and 18 degrees to be able to spray, and then we'll get some coats on the paint. So the primer I'm using is high build cellulose primer. Appears to be going on well, and it's going on to the old MG Midget paint that's been smoothed over and keyed very well as well. So I'd certainly recommend this. With the car now masked up, I'm using a 50-50 mix of cellulose and good thinners, putting that through the gun. And so far I've just applied one very thin coat to the car, just to give it a bit of a tack. And now I've loaded up the gun again with another pot of paint, so ready to give the car a good thick coat of primer now. So this will be its second coat, and my plan is to put about 3 or 4 coats onto the car in total. So after 3 good coats now, bodywork, which I'm going to paint first, is looking good. It's coming out nice and smooth. A few little areas where I'm going to need to use some knifing putty just to smooth over before we put a top coat on, but built up a nice consistent layer across the car now. So what I'm going to do is put 1 more coat on, just to get a nice thick coat of primer all over the car, and then I'm going to go for the colour. So 1 more coat and then we're done. That's 4 coats of primer. I'm quite happy with that. So now I'm going to flat that back, use the knifing putty if I've got any defects, then sand up to 600 grits just to give the primer again a nice smooth coat, and then we'll be ready to start applying some top coat onto the primer.